show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Happy to talk about it all. I'm so excited, and I did a little bit of digging last night, and I found some interesting things to tell you. Okay, but so why don't you ask me what you want to know, and what's the format? I'm here. I'm ready for the ride. I'm buckled in.
So we actually posted questions to our fans, the fans of the project.
Yeah.
So we have some fan questions, but Lauren and I will ask ours first. Um, so you had two different parts on the X Files. You were born again, and then you came back years later and did music. You sang for the show so beautifully.
Thank you.
Um, and you were also on quite a few iconic television shows in the '90s. Let's be honest. But what are your favorite behind the scenes memories from the X Files?
Oh man, I had such a good time on the show. First of all, I think it was my first time in Vancouver, and I was so happy in my hotel room, and I had so I happened to have a fond memory of being in Vancouver and being in the hotel where they put me up, and ordering room service every night. I had salmon every night in Canada. It was fantastic, and that was like I just sort of felt like I was living in this little fantasy that I got to go to work and then I could come home and eat this delicious food every night. So that was a good thing about being on the X-Files. The other thing is that it was it was the first season, my first episode. And so I feel like the show, I mean, even though it was like the 22nd episode or something, but I feel like it was still, it felt new, you know? And David and I had worked together, but it's not like I had stood opposite him in the role of Mulder. And we got on set to shoot our first scene together, and I burst out laughing. I totally burst out. I mean, David and I are old friends. We were boyfriend and girlfriend for, a good chunk of our youth. And so, but there was something about the seriousness of Mulder, and there we were, and we were trying to do this thing, and I just couldn't keep it together. So we had to get through that moment, and he was laughing too. So we had to get through that moment to get started. Uh, but then we just had such a good time. I loved the set. I loved working with Jillian. I had such a great time doing it.
So you had mentioned ordering room service. What other funny memories do you have specifically from the X Files that you could share with us?
Um, well, let's see. That was a long time ago. And so, I don't really, really all I remember, when I walk away from a job, sure, I'm going to remember some specific things that happened, but the feeling stays with me very clearly, the feeling that I had was that it was so exciting. It felt like we were making a movie, that it was a different kind of working environment, and it was just super exciting. Um, and other than that, it was a little bit run of the mill because you get up, you go, you do your job, you go back home. We weren't hanging out afterwards. They were long days, and just had to kind of get back to wherever you were staying and get a little bit of sleep so you could get started again. Um, but I don't know if the funniest thing to me was not being able to keep our shit together, David and I, when we shot that first scene, and everybody was kind of looking at us like, exactly what is going on right here. But when you're looking at somebody you know that well, um, it's hard to keep a straight face sometimes.
Was there a sense on the show at that time? As you said, you were there at the beginning of the first season, and obviously, 28 years later, we know what the show became. Was there any indication at that time that you guys realized what a special show it was and where the potential it had?
I think much, for me at least, much like my experience on Friends, Friends, I was much, much earlier in the first season. So there it was, this show was like in the can, but it wasn't on the air. So, had the world weighed in on it? Had it become what it was going to become? No, it was just this little kind of vibrating beehive where everybody could feel like, oh my God, something's happening here. And in the X Files, I think we already knew, or they already knew at 22nd episode, um, what they had. But I don't think I knew. I was just excited to go to work with David, to work on the show, to work in that genre, which was different for me. So I don't know. Did they know at that point? They may have. I can tell you that going to Vancouver to work on the X-Files felt like I was, entering into a world where something very special was happening. And that you could just feel. You felt it in the air.
Why do you think that the X-Files is still relevant to fans after almost 30 years? What do you think it is about the show that keeps people coming back?
Well, I think, I think the supernatural aspect of it. First of all, there's the chemistry, which is so much fun and so undeniable, and you just want to kind of revisit that, and I think it just kept drawing everybody in, the will they, won't they, the sort of human element, and then in terms of the supernatural and all of the kind of extraordinary ways that a fan and a viewer can make these connections, kind of the easy ones, the tenuous ones, the mysterious ones. I mean, it's really fantastic and exciting. And I, last night I went back and kind of revisited my episodes and tried to sort of look, and I wasn't really looking for connections, but I found connections, which I'll share with you. And it sort of struck me, oh, like this is X-Files through and through, and I didn't even know the connections were there. So I realized last night that my first episode was on April 19th, 1994. It aired, right? My second episode was the 19th episode of the second episode, meaning the one that behind the scenes, I was the musical director for the
Right.
recording of the song on The Unnatural.
All right.
It's a little known X-Files fact, which we are revealing here for the first time. But I hadn't looked and seen all these connections. So Born Again, the episode I acted on, where I played Sharon Lazard, was on April 19th, 1994. The Unnatural was the 19th episode of the sixth season, and William, in which I sing Michael Row Your Boat Ashore, was the 16th episode of the ninth season.
Interesting.
So and to add to that, all of them were aired in the month of April. And when you search back on the kind of recording debut history of that traditional song that I helped to arrange for The Unnatural, that was released by Blind Willie Johnson in the month of April in 1930. So that, to me, last night, I was like, oh my God, look at this little X-Files matrix that I didn't even know was there.
Now, how did you get involved in the musical side of it? I mean, how
Yeah.
the unnatural, like you said, not many people realize that. It's known that you sang Michael Row Your Boat Ashore, but how did you end up back on the show like that?
So I have, alongside my acting career, I have always sung. And I was a longtime student of Maria Barnwell, who sang bass for a group called Sweet Honey in the Rock. She was sort of my mentor for many years. I sang with an a cappella group in New York called Sons and Daughters. And then when I moved here to Los Angeles 30 some odd years ago now, I started holding kind of a community song gathering once a month. My husband's a visual artist, and his gallerist gave me her space. So this was many years back now, and I used to gather people once a month to sing. In later years, I started a community choir in Los Angeles called the Golden Bridge Community Choir, and I've been leading that for 17 years. So alongside my acting, I'm always gathering people to sing. And David and I go way back. He knows this about me. And so he reached out to me for both of those reasons. In my brain, I thought that Michael Row Your Boat Ashore came before The Unnatural, but I realized when I looked at it, it was the other way around. So yeah, so with The Unnatural, he knew that he needed a spiritual, and he needed these baseball players to sing a spiritual. And he knew that, I had really been a student of Isai's work, teaching kind of music in the African American tradition for all these years. And although I was an unlikely candidate, he knew that he could just count on me to come in, work with the actors, and musically direct the recording of the song. Which, by the way, I wasn't 100% clear about how this was going to go, and all of a sudden I found myself in this incredible environment, this massive soundstage, huge. I'd never seen a booth that big, more levers and buttons than you've ever seen in your life. I felt like, I don't know, I just felt like this teeny tiny creature in this huge vaulted warehouse space with all of the actors, each in an individual sort of, a temporarily erected sound booth, and me facing all of them. I mean, it was an amazing experience to help them get that recorded, and it moved quickly.
We interviewed Fred Lean, who played the cop. Oh my God,
Yeah,
Dale.
he played and he and I went to acting to school together in New York.
No
Really?
way.
We went to the neighborhood playhouse together. And so when I saw him there on the day that I was recording with those guys.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Small world, right?
I know, so small world. And I forgot about that too until last night when I was revisiting the episode, which is such a great episode.
So
And David, of course, is obsessed with baseball. So, what a great artistic kind of, realization of something that matters to him so much that he was able to write that and direct it. And it's awesome.
yeah,
Isn't that crazy? And you're the first people I've ever talked to about my involvement in that episode. It's just never come up, really. I don't know that I've ever actually had X-Files conversations with people. Yeah, anyway, so I'm so happy to have that memory kind of retrieved and to share it with you guys.
this is somebody named X-Files Color. It says, I love Maggie Wheeler in Born Again and everything I've seen her in. I'd love to hear her compare how she approaches her character in a horror show, such as the X-Files, versus a character in a comedy. And thanks for all. Oh, I think that was for us. The rest was for us.
I think the great thing about being a character in a horror genre is that you really you're only playing the moment. You don't know what's going on. You don't know where you are. You're trying to put things together, but in many cases, certainly in the beginning, where where Sharon Lazard finds the little girl, finds Michelle, and all, there's no, it's only just what is this moment? In this moment, I have a contentious relationship with my coworker. In this moment, I'm finding a little girl in trouble. In this moment, I'm doing what I do in my job, which is to make this kid comfortable and get somebody else to take over. In this moment, and then there's the reveal, and then there's just the scramble to understand what's happening. And that's really, it feels very different than comedy, and it's fun.
That's to our next fan question. I'm going to rephrase the question because the original question is, which do you prefer, acting in Friends or acting in X-Files? For the purpose of this interview, I'll say obviously X-Files, right? Absolutely.
Oh, X-Files. No, I love them both.
Yes, that's awesome. So I guess I'm going to reframe the question is, what were the major differences like for you on set of the, like you touched upon, a comedy versus, more like a sci-fi thriller kind of show,
Well,
X-Files? Like,
I
what
can
were
tell
the,
you on Friends, no one is surprised if you crack up in the middle of a scene. It's almost expected that you're going to make each other laugh and everybody's going to have to like hold the role while everybody pulls it together. On the X-Files, they weren't expecting, one of their actors to start crying, laughing till I cried and uncontrollably unable to get my shit together. So there's that. There's just the environment. Although, there was a lot of levity on the X-Files set. David is quite funny. Jillian is quite funny. And, uh, yeah, I'm very fortunate because I've had a handful of experiences in my career where I've worked on sets where everything has been so um, just congenial and so, with such an incredible flow and such, just from the creative to the behind the scenes, everything working like an well-oiled machine. And that's how the X-Files was, and that's how Friends was. And there's nothing better as a performer than to kind of walk into an environment where you're not feeling all the sort of crackly tension of things that aren't working, where you can just go and do your job and enjoy it. And that is something that I had in both of those experiences.
As an actor, you've worked on Multicam with Friends, which they shoot in say 3 hours. I know there's a lot of prep, there's a lot of rehearsal. You're do the full episode multiple times, but let's say your audience shoot is say 3 hours, and then you have a single camera like the X-Files, or another drama that you work on, which might take 18 hours. What's the difference for you, like preparing and being on set? Do you have a preference? Is it uh,
Uh, that's a good question. I mean, I raised kids, so during that time, I really preferred half hour. Uh, because the time constraint around 1 hour was so extraordinary, and I just couldn't imagine being away from home for all those hours. So I really leaned into my comedy life, and beautiful, amazing things happened during that chapter. But I also, as I said earlier, being on the X Files is like making a movie, and you leave everything behind, and you just live in this world. And then you go and you get a little sleep and a little food, and then you come back to this world, and you don't really know if it's day or night, quite honestly. You're just in it. You give over, you give everything over to the great unknown, and then you're just in it. And I really, of course, I loved the people there, and I loved the story, and I loved being a part of it all. So I wasn't like, oh God, when is this day going to be over? I have had that experience on our dramas, by the by, where I've been looking at my watch going, can I go home? But no, not on the X Files. I was ready to stay.
No, I think the last fan question we have, and it kind of, this is more of a Duchovny question. So can you speak a little bit about how it was working with the X-Files and then many years later on Californication, how that might have been different or similar for you?
Oh yeah. Well, look, here I got David his first job. And that was a movie that we made together called New Year's Day. And I was gonna make that movie, and the director, Henry Jaglom, said to me, "Who do you want to play your boyfriend?" And he gave me a list of names. And of course, there I mean, it's Henry works in a kind of autobiographical, improvised draw from people's real lives and real stories. And when I met him, at the time that I met him, I had been doing a sketch comedy show in New York. I was doing a show called The New Show that was directed by Lorne Michaels. It was the year that he left Saturday Night Live, and it was a primetime sketch comedy show. I got to work with the most extraordinary people because Lorne knew everybody. So from Steve Martin to Kevin Kline to Raul Julia to Penny Marshall, everybody, Catherine O'Hara, everybody, Lorraine Newman, everybody came on that show.
wow.
So, and there I was, it was like my first kind of big television gig. The show was not particularly critically well received. And so for me, it was the excitement of my life. For Lorne, it was like he'll probably never want to talk about it. But it got canceled, and I went to dinner. A friend of mine took me to dinner, and I met Henry Jaglom in a New York restaurant. And we sat and we were introduced by my friend. They were friendly. And we sat and we started talking. And David and I had been together, but we had broken up. And I was planning on moving to Los Angeles. Now that the show was canceled, I was going to take this little wind beneath my wings and move to LA. So somehow I ended up talking about my life to Henry. And, a year later, he wanted to make a movie. And, or I don't know if it was a year or more later, we became friends. I watched him edit the movie he was editing at that time when I moved to LA. And then, he wanted to make this movie with me, and he wanted to make a movie about a person at that juncture when they've been in a relationship and they've broken up and they're going to get on a bus or a train or a plane and go start over somewhere. And so he gave me a list of possible people to play my boyfriend. And I just was like, no, no. Oh yeah, no, not that one. No. And so David at that time was at Yale, but he was also taking acting. He was at Yale being brilliant. And I don't want to say being brilliant and also taking acting classes, but he was and also taking acting classes. And that was something, that kind of a desire that had bubbled up underneath all the other brilliance that was there. And I don't remember if Henry said, "What about David?" or I said, "What about David?" But anyway, I said, "Hey, how would you like to make a movie with me?" And that movie was the movie that launched David's career. So he has been phenomenally generous and kind about looping me back into some of the work that he's made over the years. Um, the X-Files, I auditioned, nothing got handed to me. But I auditioned for the X-Files and I got that part. And then he, as you know, he asked me to do the song for William. He asked me to come in and help with The Unnatural. Um, Years later, and this was just beautiful kismet, something very strange had happened. There had been a strange interaction on social media with someone that I don't know personally, but something had come up and it didn't feel good. And I didn't know what to do about it. And so I called David because I felt like it was something he understood and something he had experience with, and I wanted to get his opinion. So there we were. I think he was in New York. I was in LA. I'm like, hey, what would you do in this situation? What would you do? And he was giving me some advice, some good sage advice about what to do about this slightly odd situation. And then he said, hey, you know, they're casting a role on Californication right now that you would be good for, I think, maybe. Do you want to do it? Would you want to do it? And I'm like, yeah, well, and he said, you don't have to take your clothes off. So he said, do you want to do it? You don't have to take your clothes off. And I was like, I definitely want to do it. So at that point, um, there were some hoops to jump through. I had to get my reel together and send it to them. And, they had to sign off on me. And David was going to be directing the episode, but he didn't know when he kind of threw that out my way. By the way, had I not called him on that night, had I not called him because of this strange thing that had happened, it would have gone. He wouldn't have called me and said, hey, do you want to do this? It just happened to be that I called him on that night. And so yeah, then he thought it was one episode. He was directing it. And he said, I'm going to be directing the episode. And then he didn't realize it was like a 6 episode arc for the character. So for me, it was, I won the lottery on that one. And I loved working on Californication. I loved it. I loved everybody there. Pam Adlon is fantastic to work with. I loved playing this horrible character. And I loved working with David again because, it was a great opportunity for us to do that again. I hope we do it again and again.
You're the reason David's successful. He should be thanking you nonstop for the rest of his life. You're the reason.
Well, we made that movie, and then on the night that it premiered in Los Angeles, you could all these, the word had gotten out that there was this kid who looked like a young Richard Gere, and they were all swarming the lobby of the Directors Guild afterwards, waiting to meet David. I'm like, all right, whatever. But anyway, I'm so happy for him. He deserves every ounce of success that he has had, and he's so brave, and he just follows his muse, whatever it is, writing and making music and making movies and making television. And he's such a worker.
So we asked this question to everyone, and we love to hear the different reactions to it. But if you had something to say to the fans of the last now 28 years of the show, what would it be?
Well, if I had something to say to the fans of the last 28 years of the show, what would it be? I don't know. What is it? There's something out there. I don't know. We all know there's something out there. Thank you so much, and thanks to all the fans for loving the show so much and loving Michael Row Your Boat Ashore so much. I really love that it kind of stayed sort of secret for a lot of years, and then finally, it's on my website. It's for sale now. It's on Apple Music and all the rest. And I waited a long time to do that. I don't know why. And then I thought, I saw how many people wanted it, and I saw how many people were only listening to it with from the show with like this, with the talking and the singing in the background. And I started seeing on YouTube comments like, where can I get it without the dialogue in the back? Where can I? So anyway, I'm really touched that people really love that and want to listen to it again and again. That makes me very happy.